Hello, family, friends, and subscribers. I feel like it's been a little while since I've taken the time to say thank you. Thank you for supporting me here on this channel. Thank you for also joining me on Patreon and also just, for sharing these videos. I thank you really from the bottom of my heart. In this video, we will begin a 4-part series of the reading of the book titled The Secret Path, A Technique of Spiritual Self-Discovery for the Modern World by Paul Brunton. It opens up with a foreword by Alice Bailey, who is author of The Conscience of the Atom, a book that I've had in my library for over 30 years, and you can find it here in my playlist. The chapter on the wise man of the East reminded me about how often, regardless if it be a spiritual journey or an academic one or such things in that fashion, it reminded me of how sometimes people feel that they are not ready to go out in the world and stand in the authority of what they know. They keep searching and seeking the next degree, the next award, the next recognition or approval of someone outside themselves that to them they deem has more authority. And too often, time has no mercy on those who doubt themselves. My takeaway was, now is the time and here is the place. Get started. Live your best life. Share what you have, share what you know, and everything else you need will be presented to you along the way. And just as a great music piece, the author moves on to the next movement, expounding age-old wisdom, such as seen at the Temple of Delphi. Man, know thyself. A Delphic maxim that goes back to the 5th century BC. As you could see, we've been searching, we get it inside our own selves that there is something more, but it's not outside, it's inside. And yet, few dare to seek the path of the internal temple. Some believe that it must be reserved for priests, monks, and select group of such disposition. And here I agree with the author. That path is for all, the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker, and more, if you know what I mean. It is a beautiful path, a challenging path. It will tumble you like a piece of coal if you let it. And what will come out of that is a brilliance beyond your very own imagination. It truly is locked up in the surrender, in the simple words, to your Creator, let it be thine will, not mine. Hopefully, this book will awaken the mystic in you as it did for me. And with that, I will go ahead and turn the page. I look forward to your comments. The Secret Path, A Technique of Spiritual Self-Discovery for the Modern World by Paul Brunton. Foreword. Today, an interesting change has come over Western thought. We can discuss the fact of the soul without being considered either unduly religious or mildly unbalanced. We affirm or deny the existence of the self as freely as we discuss the atom or the sources of history. This is a significant step forward and indicates a growing sensitivity to that mysterious overself referred to by our author. Modern psychologists can broadly divide into those who affirm the presence of a controlling integrating self with the body nature and those who affirm only the existence of the mechanical form. Is there a self? Is there a subjective reality? Is there such a thing as spiritual consciousness? This is the problem before investigators today in the field of human awareness. Can the hidden self be proved and people be induced to tread the secret path to the holy place where the self can be discovered? The timelessness of this book is real. It expresses with a beautiful clarity truths which have been too often hidden under ponderous phrase, difficult oriental symbolism, and mystical vagueness. It will be welcomed by those who are alive to the moment's urgency and to humanity's new readiness for spiritual revelation. Man's deeply realized need has prepared him to tread the secret path. Humanity stands today at the gate of reality. Man is learning to recognize and desire the world of spiritual being. He is rapidly apprehending the significance of that deeper being which is hidden behind the mask of the personality. To find that deeper being, to reveal its nature, and to function consciously in the world of truth in which it dwells. This is man's immediate task, and for this the years of modern distress have prepared him. That the kingdom of God is within is the message of the ages, and thousands are now seeking the hidden way that leads to that kingdom. Arrived there, we find the sources of all inspiration. We discover the point where the intellect is transmuted into the intuition. We enter the realm of illumination. The reward given to those who enter the citadel of the soul is transfiguration, the radiance which pours through a rapidly changing personality. In that secret place, we join the ranks of the great intuitives, the inspired companions of God. We find ourselves amongst those who must save the world, for that has ever been God's way of salvation. The appeal today is for those who know, who have seen, and who have understood. Understanding, they will welcome the message of this book and feed its progress. It carries the flame of inspiration and will lead to that inspired action, practical spirituality, and dedicated service, which is the hallmark of the revealed soul. Is anything more deeply needed today? By Alice A. Bailey. End of Foreword. Chapter 1. With a Wise Man of the East. Some years ago, I wandered for a while through sun-baked Oriental lands, intent on discovering the last remnants of the mystic East, about which most of us often hear, but which few of us ever find. During those journeyings, I met an unusual man who quickly earned my profound respect and received my humble veneration. For although he belonged by tradition to the class of wise men of the East, a class which has largely disappeared from the modern world, he avoided all record of his existence and disdained all efforts to give him publicity. Time rushes onward like a roaring stream, bearing the human race with it and drowning our deepest thoughts in its noise. Yet this sage sat apart, quietly ensconced upon the grassy bank, and watched the gigantic spectacle with a calm Buddha-like smile. The world wants its great men to measure their lives by its puny foot rule, but no rule has yet been devised which will take their full height for such men if they are really worth the name and derive their greatness not from themselves but from another source. And that source stretches far away into the infinite. Hidden here and there in stray corners of Asia and Africa, a few seers have preserved the traditions of an ancient wisdom. They live like ghosts as they guard their treasure. They dwell outwardly apart, this specter race, keeping alive the divine secrets which life and fate have conspired to confide in their care. The hour of our first meeting is still graven on my memory. I met him unexpectedly. He made no attempt at formal introduction. For an instant, those Sibylline eyes gazed into mine, but all the strained earth of my past and the white flowers that had begun to spring up on it were alike seen during that one tinkle of the bell of time. There in that seated being was a great impersonal force that read the scales of my life with better sight than I could ever hope to do. I had slept in the scented bed of Aphrodite, and he knew it. I had also lured the gnomes of thought to mine for strange enchanted gold in the depths of my spirit. He knew that too. I felt, too, that if I could follow him into his mysterious places of thought, all my mysteries would drop away, my resentments turn to toleration, and I would understand life, not merely grumble at it. He interested me much, despite the fact that his wisdom was not of a kind which is easily apparent, and despite the strong reserve which encircled him. He broke his habitual silence only to answer questions upon such recondite topics as the nature of man's soul, the mystery of God, the strange powers which lie unused in the human mind, and so on. But when he did venture to speak, I used to sit enthralled as I listened to his soft voice under a burning tropic sun or pale crescent moon. For authority was vested in that calm voice, and inspiration gleamed in those luminous eyes. Each phrase that fell from his lips seemed to contain some precious fragment of essential truth. The theologians of a stuffier century taught the doctrine of man's original sin, but this adept taught the doctrine of man's original goodness. In the presence of this sage, one felt security and inward peace. The spiritual radiations which emanated from him were all penetrating. I learned to recognize in his person the sublime truths which he taught, while I was no less hushed into the reverence by his incredible sainted atmosphere. He possessed a deific personality which defies description. I might have taken shorthand notes of the discourses of the sage. I might even print the record of his speech. But the most important part of his utterances, the subtle and silent flavor of spirituality which emanated from him, can never be reported. If, therefore, I burn literary incense before his bust, it is but a mere fraction of the tribute I ought to pay him. One could not forget that wonderful pregnant smile of his, with its hint of wisdom and peace won from suffering and experience. He was the most understanding man I have ever known. You could be sure always of some words from him that would smooth your way a little, and the word always verified what your deepest feeling told you already. And yet, in its settled moments, his face bore an expression of deep melancholy. Still, it was a resigned melancholy, not the bitter, rebellious kind one often sees. You knew that, at some period of his past, he had suffered some inexpressible agony. The words of this sage still flame out in my memory like beacon lights. I pluck golden fruit from rare meetings with wise men, wrote transatlantic Emerson in his diary, and it is certain that I plucked whole basketfuls during my talks with this man. Our best philosophers of Europe could not hold a candle to him. But the inevitable hour of parting came. Time turned around this old globe of ours. I went back to Europe, busied myself with one thing and another, and quite lately prepared to return to the East once more. I proposed no less a thing than an exploration right across Asia, an exploration that would continue my old quest of the last surviving exponents of genuine Oriental wisdom and magic. I hoped to wander through the yellow deserts of Egypt and among the wisest sheiks of Syria, to mingle with the vanishing fakirs of remote Iraq villages, to question the old Sufi mystics of Persia in mosques with graceful bulbous domes and tapering minarets, to witness the marvels performed by yogi magicians under the purple shadows of Indian temples, to confer with the wonder-working lamas of Nepal and the Tibetan border, to sit in the Buddhistic monasteries of Burma and Ceylon, and to engage in silent, telepathic conversation with century-old yellow sages in the Chinese hinterland and the Gobi Desert. My kit was almost packed. My last few papers were being put in order, and I was nearly ready to leave. I turned my face away from the crowded streets of the great city in which I lived. "London is a roost for every bird," wrote shrewd Disraeli, and I must be one who is somewhat old-fashioned. I like the quiet London of 18th century streets and dignified old railed-in squares, and I regard them as welcome bases in a prevailing desert of noisy modernity. I see the satin-coated and knee-breeched ghost of a past century when I walk around the pleasant grassy squares at night. I dislike the London which provides a stage for countless motors and hurrying people. I am fond of the London which hovers around the wide Thames at places like Rotherhithe and Wapping, for there, among the picturesque old wharves and barnacled quays, I stroll in an atmosphere faintly redolent of the sea, and I watch romantic-looking craft come and go on the river. I prefer to see a weather-beaten barge take its tranquil way down the Thames to a painted demon of a lorry pursuing its nerve-wracking, noisy route along the street. And so this fateful day I sought a few hours' escape among certain friendly trees in the green countryside. I found them after traversing rolling chalk hills, winding lanes, and quiet beech woods. My eyes became half-closed. The harsh, confused noise of thronged towns had faded, and I was once more sitting in almost tranced stillness. It was not long before old habit reasserted itself, and I expectantly drew out a worn notebook. I sat down in the lush green grass with pen in hand, and book upon the knee, seeking to cast my net upon the delicate thoughts and beautiful moods which swim across the heart when all is still. It is in such solitary rural silence that I have often felt more at ease than in many a city drawing-room, and it is when companioned by such silvery beaches that I have often felt a more beautiful and sincere presence than with many human beings. It was the mellow autumn season, and all around me were the gold and green tinted leaves which lie down to die in such profusion when the life of the year begins to fail. The late afternoon sun shone generously upon everything around. The hours slipped past one another. The soft murmur of a few insects rose and died away as they flew through the air, but still the pen lay motionless between my fingers. One waits beside the silent shore of the mind for the coming of exalted moods whose fragile bodies are as gossamer. So soft are they that if one does not cast one's net aright, the rough chords of mortal tongue will slay the tiny wanderers with brutal touch, and so shy are they that one must sometimes wait long before the first timorous alien will venture into the net. But once a few captives have been gathered together, the reward descends rich upon one's heart. In this spiritual element lie all the fragrant hopes of man, waiting, like so many unplucked flowers, for the soft hands which shall garner them for a sightless people. These visitations of a loftier mood provide one with jewels for one's writings. In such sacred moments one touches the infinite. Sentences form themselves from the ether, one hardly knows how. Phrases disengage themselves from the skies and descend upon this sublunary world to feed one's pen. One must yield to these mysterious moods and not resist them. Thus does one render oneself worthy to become a mediator between the immortal gods and frail, forgetful man. Today, however, I thought that I had waited in vain, and so closed the book and replaced the pen in my pocket. Soon the strange hour of twilight would shade the face of time, and then the soft feet of night would creep into the halls of day. Thereafter, I would rise up from the fallen trunk where I had moodily pondered in vain, and with slow steps I would stumble homewards over the darkened fields and through woods which overripe leaves had carpeted a rich brown. But instead there came a strange pause, and a film fell across my eyes, making the sense of sight oblivious of the earth world around me. The ichor leapt in my veins, flinging the sluggish blood aside, while a great yellow light seemed to shine within my heart. A hand seemed to touch my shoulder, so I raised my head and looked upwards to find a benignant face bent over me. And he whom I had known in the Orient, the wise one of the East, appeared before me, his grave bearded face as clear, as recognizable as though it were there in the flesh. Certainly he came to me with a tread which was as silent as the fall of fresh dew. I made the humble obeisance of my heart in veneration and greeting. His strange eyes turned remonstratingly upon me. He said gently, "My son, it is not well. Hast thou forgotten compassion? Shalt thou go forth to add to thy store of knowledge while others starve for the crumbs of wisdom? Wilt thou commune with the divine ones when there are those who look for God but perceive only the impassable barrier of the sky? When there are those who throw their prayers to a void which returns no answer? Stay thy feet, if needs be, but forget not thy fellows in distress. Leave not for the lands of waving palms until thou hast well regarded these words. May peace be ever with thee." And thereupon, without another word, he passed out of my vision, as silently and as mysteriously as he had appeared. When I became aware of my environment, I could barely see the trees again, for it was grown dark. The light had faded out of the day, and the scintillating stars were coming to birth in the sky. The first wan rays of the moon threw a few gleams upon the fallen tree. I could see little else. I arose and made the homeward journey. As I walked through the grass, with sticks trembling in my hand and with thoughts fastened upon the august utterance which had fallen from those reproving lips, I suddenly realized that the accusation was perfectly true. I had considered none save myself. I had followed the light of the star of truth, the star which attracted me most out of the whole sky, but I had followed it for myself alone. I left my countryside musings and returned to town, entering with a strange awe its streets so canopied by the darkness of night. Here were millions of beings compelled by the demands of society to go to bed at the behest of a clock and to rise at the ringing of a noisy alarm bell. Yes, I had supped alone, feasting on divine verities that can never die. Would not my own soul grow lean and small if I disdained those who were hungry for that which I had taken freely out of the seemingly impenetrable silence of the sky? Could one rest with the mere recovery of these truths for oneself? There are other people in this populous world, and among them a few who might welcome such thoughts as I could give them. The world of fact has little sympathy with the man who stands aloof and keeps his soul free for visions in which it does not share. And the world is right. He who are seers and mystics have to draw the last crystal drop of water from out the well of vision. But with that begins our duty, stern and strict, of offering the unfamiliar drink to the first wayfarer thirsty enough to accept it. Not for ourselves alone, but for all alike does Neptune cast his magic trident over the deep places of the soul and show us his glamorous pictures therein. If the privilege of sitting at the feet of forgotten but none the less potent gods is indeed high, then the travail of carrying their message to an unheeding yet suffering people is just as high, just as noble. Perhaps no man's mind is so clothed in ugliness that a few faint gleams of hidden beauty do not trouble him now and again and cause him to raise his head a little towards the stars, sometimes in perplexity at the meaning of it all, sometimes in wonder at the ceaseless harmony of the spheres. Forget not thy fellows in distress, my strange visitant had told me. What then could I do? I could not tarry overmuch in this western country and neglect my trans-Asiatic expedition, for which the pressure of fate and the pull of inclination had conspired to smooth my path. How then, for the sake of one's fellows, could one assume the prophetic mantle and hat and go out to spread what one had learned to regard as truth? And the answer rose up clearly in my mind in the shape of a self-evident thought. I would set down some of the things which life had taught me and then leave the written record behind. I could not but call at the doors of men and deliver a few thoughts which had helped me, and then I must withdraw and leave the latter to do their mission. I could not undertake to play the advocate on their behalf. Whoever would receive them readily should surely be helped too, but whoever rejected them might find elsewhere his meat and drink. Could my record but meet with a man at some crucial troubled moment of his life, who knew how far it might guide him towards the eternal good? I would try to put into the words of that book a wisdom learnt from dearly bought experience. There would be sentences that would hold the marrow of days spent in mourning, and phrases would fall from my pen which would embalm tears that once fell from my eyes. I would do all this because I should like those pages to carry healing and consolation to those who are in present distress, to show them that man contains rare and unexpected resources within himself, wherewith to meet and overcome the hard trials which few can escape. But it need not therefore be a joyless book, for it would also hold the lingering echoes of many happy hours spent in sublime peace. It would more than hint at the ecstatic enjoyment of diviner states which are open to man. No, it need not be a joyless book. Indeed, it could not be. The flowers must drop their petals one by one. The moon waxes and must wane. Even the lark's fine song must one day be stilled. But I have found a land where strange flowers grow, and grow forever, where the sky's light is never less, and where all things sing an immortal music that has not ceased since time began. Thus the pages which followed took their genesis. If they seem to consist of little more than a collection of scattered thoughts loosely tied together, I must ask the pardon and indulgence of the reader, for I gather my written thoughts in the motley. They are always disjointed and come only in fragments. I stand ashamed before the facile orations of other men, whose sequences flow like a stream of oil. These halting utterances of mine I attribute to a natural impulse of my mind to enter into a state of rest, rather than to enter a state of activity. There is a war in my heaven every time I take up my pen, which has accepted the limitations with which it was born, and does not aspire towards a better technique. It will be observed that there is very little argument in these pages, but very much that will provoke it. The reason will be plain to those who have mastered the mystery of Christ's saying, "Except ye become as little children, ye shall not enter the kingdom of heaven." But it will be hard to grasp by the ultra-clever, the super-shrewd, and the ego-centered. For intellect is but a machine. It makes a splendid servant, yet a bad master. We are apt to criticize where we do not comprehend. Where something here indited appears difficult to grasp or seems superficially obscure, the reader should nevertheless ponder upon it until he reaches the point of discovery. If I can stimulate him to discover his own true thought, I render him better service than if I teach him. This age reads in order to kill time, but a few wise ones read in order to make time alive. I hope the latter will find this book. Crusading holds no charms for me, and agitating would be but a torment. Rather would I be a stimulator, stimulating others not to join some cult, but to think for themselves, and to think deeper than the conventional man of our time. It is only by thinking a matter out for oneself that we understand it best. I cannot hope to convey my understanding to you, but I can hope to arouse that faculty within you which will give you perception. Hence these writings do not formulate any fixed system which you have to swallow by an act of faith. They aim at being suggestive. They try to challenge you to think for yourself. They provide you with mental nuts to crack in the form of unusual questions. You can create a new system of ideas for yourself by musing upon these pages, but it will be your own system, not another's. Such thoughts as these may begin by startling you, but they may end by stimulating you. I do not know. I am not writing for the benefit of the man who has already put up the shutters of his mind and firmly fixed them in case the light of a few new ideas might stream in and disturb his sleep. I am writing for the few who, amid the modern muddle of bewildering doctrines, have placed their feet upon tentative ground because there seems no safer place in sight. Those who look for plenty of facts in this book will not find them. There are thousands of books which will give them all the facts they can ever want. And better still, there is the voluminous book of life, which they can always consult and in which they can always verify every statement I have made. My aim has been to give the soul of all these facts. I have tried to sum up in one flash of a sentence what lies behind 100,000 facts, events, and experiences. Because I spent the years stretching my philosophic soul upon the rack until I found the truth, I am in no mood to listen to polished platitudes nor to write them. Yet really there is nothing now in the essential thought behind these pages, though it does not matter so much whether these are new or whether they are neglected thoughts, as whether they are true thoughts. Medieval men like Thomas à Kempis and Jacob Boehme communicated the same thought in earlier centuries, but they communicated it in a form which makes no great appeal to me and will make even far less appeal to my contemporaries. Yet they wrote out of a veridic experience which any man of the 20th century may duplicate, if he will. Those who regard this experience as inconceivable at most and illogical at least should investigate before they snatch at such final conclusions. For I know that I have tried to tackle this difficult investigation of life in a scientific yet reverent spirit, to approach it with an impartial love of truth for its own sake, and not in order to confirm or refute any particular theories. That I should treat seriously of little-known states of consciousness in this book may seem superstition to the many, but it is true science to me. Those who can receive it in this light will find their faith rewarded by time, who will likewise pay their credulity with first-hand knowledge. My confidence stands serene and unshaken that I can make good my theses against all comers, but only if they are prepared to undertake the same psychological experiments which I undertook. The thoughts I now give out did not come to me after long argument. They came after long experience. Whoever therefore would understand them aright must be willing to invite the same experience, and this will come readily enough if he is as keen on finding truth as he is on his other and more mundane affairs. If therefore I find the spiritual life no less substantial than the material one, so can every reader of this book. I possess no especial privilege which other human beings do not possess. I can claim no magic gift which has not been fought for by continued effort. What I have found within myself is precisely what anyone else, even a hardened Chicago gangster, may find in his own self too. If the phrases of this book are occasionally fervent and sometimes heated, this can be explained only because it is a transcript from life, not a collection of academical theories evolved amid the quiet cloisters of Cambridge. Can no one be a good philosopher unless he writes coldly, as though he took no interest in his subject? Must his pages be pale and colorless? Must he carefully prune all emotional expressions out of them before he is safe reading? The critic cannot refute this work because it is based not upon my human intellectual opinions, but upon eternal truths as old as the starry heavens that greet our gaze at night. Truths that are embedded in both nature and man. They are there, but they must be dug out. This book is but one voice crying in the wilderness of this stricken world. There are others, and in many countries. The message it carries in its pages is simple yet subtle. It is a literary arrow drawn and disposed at a venture, but it is yet guided by a higher hand than mine. Fate, the needs of many persons who have written to me, and the expressed wish of this wise man of the East, one of my spiritual guides, have all conspired to thrust this work upon me. The book will find its way into the expectant hands of some men and women who care for truth, and it may serve them. I have endeavored to give faithful report to a voice which appears to be dumb in most men. Therefore, I hope these printings will be not without some value to them. The fact that millions of men and women around me are preoccupied with matters of another order invites me to remind them that they and their activities shall shortly or at length vanish from this globe, but that there is a way open for them leading to the eternal life which is enduring treasure. Some will label me as of that dwindling crowd of dreamers who think to find a starry height in man. They will not be wrong, but I would beg them to realize that they can make my dream their own reality. The way I have followed may be aside from the common one, but it is not so far off that more cannot tread it also. If a foolish age calls us a band of mere dreamers, we at least have the consolation of knowing that we dream while they sleep in dire spiritual unconsciousness. Others will ask, can this light be followed in the midst of present-day sorrows and sufferings? To them I would say, this is precisely the time when its divine worth can best be proved. There are certain essential truths about life, certain fundamental and unalterable principles which govern living, which have been known to the wise of all ages from the farthest antiquity till the present day. Healing can be found for all. No man is so broken, so oppressed by burdens of ill health, poverty, and unhappiness, but there is some way out of or around his problem, or in the last resort some way to bear it. This is so, this must be so, because all men exist within the universal mind, which has brought this world into being, a mind which is perennially benevolent, unfathomably wise, and eternally peaceful. There are ugly things in the social life around us, which may appear to contradict the latter statement, but the man who is willing to make the effort and unfold his spiritual insight will discover that the statement is a true one, all appearances to the contrary. The least result of continued effort along the lines laid down in this book will be that the practitioner will become established in an inner peace which must mark him out from his fellows as a man of envied poise. And after he has found this peace, and other people will come to him, both young and old, and question him for the secret which seems to have eluded them. And then he, in his turn, will show them the way. Chapter 2. Man, Science's Greatest Riddle. A quote from Pope's Essay on Man. Know then thyself, presume not God to scan. The proper study of mankind is man. Placed on this isthmus of a middle state, a being darkly wise and rudely great, with too much knowledge for the skeptic's side, with too much weakness for the stoic's pride. He hangs between, in doubt to act or rest, in doubt to deem himself a god or beast, in doubt his mind or body to prefer, born to die, and reasoning but to err. Sole judge of truth in endless arrow hurled, the glory, jest, and riddle of the world. End quote. The philosopher sits in the gallery of the theater of life, looking down upon the play being enacted on the distant stage. It may be this exteriorized position which enables him to pass adequate judgments upon it all. Those who sit in the stalls of the passing show of this world have a nearer view than those who sit in the gallery, but they do not necessarily take a truer view of the play. The mysterious meaning of life means nothing to us. We do not permit such a problem to take entry into our consciousness. We like to regulate such an inquiry to philosophical old fogies or credulous old clergymen. The search for truth has become a bore. That which should provide us with a happy purpose is an unspeakable occupation and an unpardonable subject in polite society. God writes his message on the face of this round planet. Man, being self-blinded, is unable to read it. A few, having sight, interpret it to the others, but the human mass sneers at them for their pains. Only the intuitive few, among the cultured and the intelligent and the childlike simple ones, among the peasants and workers, receive the message and return love to the messengers. Therefore, it is that the story of man's later history is read with tears and tragedy. But the complete story of humanity is neither a tragedy nor a comedy. No curtain falls, nor is there an end. Yes, mankind seems stricken with spiritual blindness and deafness, unable to read the mystic writing on the wall of this world, unwilling to listen to the few seers who can do this. We pass through our days stumbling and groping. Uttered warnings or wise counsel we dismiss, such as the fervid vaporings of cranks, just as the Jews dismiss Christ's pointed truths. In the result, men wander helplessly amid the bewildering chaos of today. We rise from the cradle of birth and grasp at life with passionate hands, but soon sink back into the passionless grave. Our little selves are all absorbed with the importance of our struggles and aspirations, our triumphs and defeats. Our luring possessions hold us captive, and we fret or fever ourselves on their account. We cannot help that, for we are human. But the Sphinx, rising out of Egyptian sands and surveying the mortal race of men, smiles and smiles and smiles. Yet man is a rational being and instinctively craves for a rational explanation of things. He lives in a predominantly scientific and intellectual age, all his experiences interpreted by the light of a purely materialistic reason, but life appears to draw a hard line upon the map of his own nature, leaving a vast unknown land where reason seems unable to penetrate. Reading in one of Bertrand Russell's old essays his fine but pessimistic confession of faith, I take it as typical of the sterile attitude forced upon those scientists who refuse all hope of ever exploring the unknown land. He wrote that man is the product of causes which had no prevision of the end they were achieving, that his origin, his growth, his hopes and fears, his loves and beliefs are but the outcome of accidental collocations of atoms, that no fire, no heroism, no intensity or thought and feeling can preserve an individual life beyond the grave, that all the labors of the ages, all the devotion, all the inspiration, all the noonday brightness of human genius are destined to extinction in the vast depth of the solar system. All these things, if not quite beyond dispute, are yet so nearly certain that no philosophy which rejects them can hope to stand. Such are the pessimistic thoughts which find tongue today among the intellectuals of our race. We can see the achievements of the scientists all around us in the world today. We must always admire their developed intellectuality. But yet, they can only teach us the ABC of life. They do not know the XYZ of it. Most of them are now frank enough to admit this, to confess their ignorance of the primal causes. Those who would have us fall back on common sense in these matters wish us to fall back on a pitiful reed. They forget that common sense, insofar as it is merely the general, uninstructed opinion, is sometimes synonymous with common ignorance. Where then can we go to learn the first letters of life's alphabet? We must go where humanity has always gone, where alone it can go. We must go to the seers and sages. Whilst the scientists have been searching the material universe for fresh facts, the seers have been searching their own selves and exploring their own minds for old truths, for they have come to realize that they can but recover the ancient wisdom of man. What the first seer found and recorded thousands of years ago, the last seer finds and agrees with today. But what the first scientist of the 19th century found and recorded, the last scientist of today laughs at and flings aside. The latest results of science have already laid the frigid speculations of mid-Victorian scientists in a deep tomb. Yet the scientist is so sainted by the race today that unless and until he nods approval to each separate revelation of the seer, a process which has been going on under our very eyes this last half-century, the pearl is thrown to the dust as false. Living scientists who can hardly be called dreamers now lend their names to the ideas of the seers. Bishop Berkeley's major doctrine was a similar view to that of the Indian absolutists. He asserted that all we know of the world is our reaction to it, our impression of it. He made mind the measuring rod of the reality of our universe, and hence placed mind as the first and fundamental reality. Sir James Jeans, by some brilliant efforts, has shown how physical science, working from the idea that the material world is the basic reality, has nevertheless been forced to consider favorably this hypothesis of Berkeley's. The conclusions of Einstein and Whitehead have similarly helped to confirm the bishop's assertion. Jeans writes in The Mysterious Universe, "All those bodies which compose the mighty frame of the world have not any substance without the mind." This Berkeleyan conclusion is again reinforced by Sir Arthur Eddington, the eminent physicist, who likewise pictures the universe as an idea in the mind of God. He even denies actuality apart from consciousness. Sir Oliver Lodge's work in physics, as well as his investigation into spiritualism, also points to man's mind as the reality in a world of vanishing matter. Our disdainful materialists dismiss this idea with a snap of their fingers. Those scientists who do accept it become, in colloquial language, cranks. It is noteworthy, however, that the latter are in the foremost ranks of their profession and have been led to acceptance only after prolonged and profound research. One may make a little prophecy and declare that the whole army of scientists is unconsciously treading in this direction. But we must free ourselves from the self-deception that the personality possesses a true standard of consciousness. We must first create within ourselves a true humility before we can know the liberating truth. We must enter with Descartes the clever Frenchman into that frame of mind wherein he began one of his works. Quote, I have held much to be true, which I now discover to be false. I have no reason to suppose anything to be more certain. Possibly everything that I conceive and believe is false. What then is true? What is certain? End quote. Thus the old mechanistic conception of life, which was established by the founders of modern science from the 17th century onwards, has begun to die out in the laboratory and lecture room. The physicists themselves, once the proponents of the gospel of matter, have now become uncomfortably uncertain of physical phenomena. Their extended researches have shown them that what they once called inanimate matter can display certain properties which the textbooks lay down as hitherto considered peculiar to the organic alone. This is the tragedy of time. It tests all things and ideas and proves again and again the falsity of the current conceptions of the moment. When the craft of science took the winds of the 17th century with Bacon's carefully prepared compass, its crew would have been astounded had they been told in what strange waters it would be sailing in the 1930s. For the ship is bearing down on the harbor of those early philosophers who declared that time hardly has a separate existence apart from the human brain, and that matter is the holding together of myriads of infinitesimal particles in an all-pervading ether. 19th century science pedestaled the theory that life is a product of matter. 20th century science is rapidly efficating a volte-face and is watching matter dissolve into electrons, into a mere collection of electrified particles which elude sight and sense. The step from this stage into the matterless world beyond is not such a far one, intellectually. Philosophy, once a sneered at Cinderella, is now beginning to come into her own. Brilliant scientists like Jeans and Eddington have shown the inability of physical science to arrive at the nature of things without her help. If we survey the course of scientific and philosophic thought since the year 1859, when Darwin published his epical Origin of Species, we may trace its descent deep into materialism during the last century, and its ascent towards a more spiritual interpretation of the universe during this century. The materialists who talk a mid-Victorian language in Darwinian accents are becoming unintelligible to the brighter generation of today, who have followed science into the strange findings of Jeans and Einstein and Lodge. When Einstein showed what a weird twist the sun rays undergo before reaching our globe, the scientific lights which were guiding us dimmed a little, and men grew wary of jumping to conclude the obvious. So, too, the psychology of 50 years ago looks a little woeful at the present time. The studies in abnormal psychology alone have played havoc with the seemingly sound explanations of that time. The new order of scientific inquirers, who now concern themselves with problems of time and causality, especially the mathematical physicists, have opened up entirely new vistas. Einstein has also taught us to look upon time as another dimension, though we have hardly grasped the full import of this revolutionary idea. And if his later work is leading him anywhere, it is leading him to regard mind as the ultimate reality. We live in an age of applied science. Knowledge comes first, belief is but secondary. We probe every fact or event in this world with a searching why. There is a cause for every visible effect. The old times, when a baffling event was explained by a reference to the will of God or to the fiat of an angel, are gone, and gone for good. Spiritual truth must henceforth stand upon a scientific foundation. It must never be afraid of any question, and it must not dismiss the honest investigator as irreligious because he wants proof before he will believe. During the closing decades of the 18th century and the opening decades of the 19th, two constellations of literary and scientific luminaries appeared in the European sky which indicated and inaugurated the Age of Reason. God was dethroned, and reason became the throned sovereign of philosophy. Now science receives our highest worship. The scientist is the Pope of today and sits in the Vatican of world authority. We receive his learned revelation in a spirit of religious awe. We trust his pontifical pronouncements as once nearly all Europe trusted the creeds and dogmas of the Church. It is not the purpose of these thoughts to decry science, to cast contempt upon that vast structure of patiently acquired facts. I possess a profound respect for the intellectual abilities and patient character of the scientist. I believe his work has its right and useful place in life, but I do not believe that that place is the highest. The practical utility of the scientific method is not to be deprecated. Only the fool will scorn the wonders which science has given man, though we would do well to pause and remember Disraeli's perceptive remark that the European talks of progress because by the aid of a few scientific discoveries he has established a society which has mistaken comfort for civilization. The fact that the scientist has confined his attention to the objective world does not reduce the value of his discoveries. He has but to turn his attention inwards, to use the same methods of experiment and deduction upon the subjective world, to turn his searchlight of investigation towards the center of his own mind, and he will penetrate the sphere of the spiritual. Science has made the strides of a giant, but all her steps are in one direction, outwards, ever outwards. This is as it should be. Now the time has come to put an insight to her discoveries, to ensoul the forms she has created. Is the soul a mere academic concept, an intellectual plaything for the professors to accept or deny? Is it only something upon which theologians may victoriously sustain their theses and at which rationalists may fire their verbal shrapnel? At present, the scientist can find no chemical trace of the soul. He cannot make it register on any of his instruments as he can make a gas register. But if chemical and mechanical reactions cannot be obtained, he need not therefore give up the quest baffled. Another way lies open. It may not be a conventional way, but it leads to the same objective, the discovery of the soul. If he loves truth better than convention, if he values the understanding of human life more than he values the understanding of a bit of rock, he will investigate that way. The method I propose to give is an extremely ancient one and goes so far back in man's history that its origin is lost in the dim mist of antiquity. Yet let not this fact be a charge against it, for the ancients were giants in the understanding of spiritual mysteries, but infants in the study of physical science. The moderns are masters in the development of physical science, but novices in the understanding of spiritual mysteries. The great German philosopher Kant said that there were two outstanding wonders of God's creation. He said these were the starry heavens above and the mind of man within. Great as are the exploits of science in the external world, greater discoveries yet awaited this century in the domain of psychology. Man will draw back startled when he understands the mysterious processes which occur within those inverted bowls of bone we call skulls. Psychology, the science of mind, and the study of consciousness offers the most valuable rewards to true scientific research. No other subject is understood so little, yet means so much, for it holds the key to man's deeper happiness. Time will necessarily lift the idea of the soul out of the limbo of discarded theological notions into the grouping of scientifically tested propositions. But the science of that day will perhaps be as ready to utilize the mind as an experimenting instrument as today it uses the microscope. What are now regarded as the foolish illusions of mystics will then be the verified truths of the science of parapsychology, to be publicly proclaimed without reserve. That the 20th century will unveil somewhat of this mystery, who that has followed the gropings of science can doubt. During its very first decade, the penetrating brain of the French thinker Bergson flashed the following prophetic message to his pen. Quote, "To explore the most sacred depths of the unconscious, to labor in the subsoil of consciousness, that will be the principal task of psychology in the century which is opening. I do not doubt that wonderful discoveries await it there." End quote. A leading scientist like Eddington tells us that the physical universe is an abstraction if it is not linked with consciousness. Mind is no longer to be regarded as a mere byproduct evolved by matter. The next and obvious step is to investigate the phenomena of consciousness, an investigation which was ridiculed a half-century ago by Huxley because he regarded such phenomena as mere shadows attached to the real phenomena. This internal exploration is well worthwhile, for there is something within the mind of man and beast, something that is neither intellect nor feeling, but deeper than both, to which the name of intuition may fitly be given. When science can truly explain why a horse will take its drunken rider or driver for miles through the dark and find its own way home, why field mice seal up their holes before the cold weather comes, why sheep move away to the lee side of a mountain before severe storms, when it can tell us what warns the tortoise to retire to rest and refuge before every shower of rain, and when it can really explain who guides a vulture many miles distant to the dead body of an animal, we may then learn that intuition is sometimes a better guide than intellect. Science has wrested from the clasp of nature some astonishing secrets, but thus far it has not discovered the source of intuition. Intellect, which is able to propound a multitude of enigmas concerning man, destiny, and death, is unable to solve them. When science shall have conquered the world, and the last glimmer of the last mystery shall have died out, it will still be faced with the greatest of all problems. Man, dost thou understand thyself? I would like to have lived in Athens at the time when one could wander into the marketplace and hear a certain snub-nosed, pugnacious man, one Socrates, cross-question the public man of the city, and repeatedly pose them this favorite question of his. A man like Socrates does not die, and his sublime character outlives the grave. When all the latest literatures have been examined, and all the earliest papyri have been exhumed, we shall find no wiser precept than the Delphic oracle's injunction, know thyself, and the Indian rishis' counsel to inquire into the self. These words, though older than the mummies in the British Museum, might have come from the typewriter of a modern thinker. The ages cannot kill a truth, and the first man who praised it will find his echo right down through the centuries. We live on a whirling ball in space, positioned somewhere in the great sky between the star of Venus and the star of Mars. There is something in this for man to think about, and something at which to laugh. He has measured with undeniable accuracy the mileage between his own planet and the two stars. Although the distances are so tremendous as to beggar imagination, yet he is unable to measure the extent of his own mind. He is a mystery to himself, a mystery which remains unsolved even when death's bitter waters come lapping to his feet. Is it not ironical that the soul of man should seem less open to investigation than the earth on which he abides? Is it not passing strange that he should have been too busy with the world without to have troubled his mind about the world within until lately? Why should he worry how the universe works? He does not have to run it, anyhow, but he does have to run himself. The solar system turns without thine aid. Live, die, the universe is not afraid, wrote that clever thinker, Zangwill. Man, however, hardly appreciates this pointed truth. He knows more about the workings of an automobile than he knows about the workings of his inner self. Yet the ancients taught, and a few of us have confirmed their teaching, that there is a stratum of his consciousness which bears the richest vein of all, pure gold. Should he not make this his chief concern? Compared with its other results, modern science has discovered very little about the nature of man, even though it has discovered how to harden metals, how to drive a half-ton shell into the next city, and 100 lesser things. During the last 3 centuries, man's knowledge of the physical world has grown with amazing acceleration, but his knowledge of himself lingers far behind. We can build giant bridges to span rivers of monstrous width, but we are unable to span the simple problem of who am I? Our railway engines will traverse a whole continent with ease, but our minds cannot traverse the mystery of the self. The astronomer brings the farthest star to the sight of his observatory, but he himself will bow his head in shame if you ask him whether he has brought his passion under complete control. We are full of curiosity concerning our planet, but we walk indifferently by at the mention of self. We have gathered highly detailed information about almost everything under the sun. We know the work, qualities, and properties of almost all the objects and phenomena of this earth, but we do not know ourselves. The very persons who have been studying all the sciences have yet to study the science of self. The very men who have discovered the why and wherefore of the lives of tiny insects do not know the why and wherefore of their own lives. We know the value of everything, but we do not know our own wonderful value. We have packed the encyclopedias with thousands of pages concerning thousands of things, but who can write an encyclopedia about the mystery of his own self? Why is it that the thing which interests every man most is himself? Because self is the only reality of which we are certain. All facts of the world around us and all thoughts in the world within us exist for us only when our own self becomes aware of them. Self sees the earth and earth exist. Self is conscious of an idea and the idea exists. Berkeley, by the process of acute thinking, arrived at the same position. He showed that the material world would be non-existent apart from some mind to perceive it. What then is self? There is no secret in the mysterious book of nature which, with time and patience, cannot be read. No lock has been made but has its fitting key, and we may oft judge the handicraft of nature by the handicraft of man. The study of the self will one day prove the master key to open all philosophical doors, all scientific conundrums, all life's locked problems. Self is the ultimate. It is the first thing we know as babes, and will be the last thing we shall know as sages. The greatest certainty in knowledge comes only in the sphere of self. We can know the world and its objects only through instruments and our senses, but that which reads those instruments and uses those senses is the self. Therefore, we are beaten back to this position in the end, that the study of self is the most important study to which any thinker can give his mind. A sophist approached one of the wise men of the ancient Greece and thought to puzzle him with the most perplexing questions. But the sage of Miletus was equal to the test, for he replied to them all without the least hesitation, yet with the utmost exactitude. 1. What is the oldest of all things? God, because he has always existed. 2. What is the most beautiful of all things? The universe, because it is the work of God. 3. What is the greatest of all things? Space, because it contains all that has been created. 4. What is the most constant of all things? Hope, because it still remains with man after he has lost everything else. 5. What is the best of all things? Virtue, because without it there is nothing good. What is the quickest of all things? Thought, because in less than a minute it can fly to the end of the universe. 7. What is the strongest of all things? Necessity, which makes man face all the dangers of life. What is the easiest of all things? To give advice. But when it came to the 9th question, our sage pronounced a paradox. He gave an answer which I am certain his worldly wise querent never understood, and which to most people will give only the most superficial meaning. The question was, what is the most difficult of all things? And the Milesian sage replied, to know thyself. This was the bidding to ignorant man from the ancient sages. This shall be the bidding yet. Chapter 3. The Mysterious Overself. A quote by G.P. Williamson. Remote yet near, unutterably aged, lone, he sits within the temple's inner shrine, with folded hands and countenance divine, omniscient, inscrutable, unknown. End quote. Saints and sages, thinkers and philosophers, priests and scientific inquirers have tried for centuries to understand the enigmatic nature of the human soul. They find man a paradoxical being, one capable of descent into the darkest abysses of evil, and yet equally capable of ascent to the sublimest heights of nobility. They discover two creatures within his breast, one related to the demons and the other related to the angels. So wonderfully constituted is man that he can develop out of his own nature all that is most admirable, equally with all that is most reprehensible in life. Are we mere lumps of animated matter? Has man no higher birth than the flesh? Or are we spirit entities, bright and radiant from God, but temporarily housed and limited in our bodies? Are we, as many think, nothing more than improved monkeys, ex-apes with ugly traits that betray our lineage? Or are we, as a few believe, nothing less than degenerate angels? Are we to be the hapless prey of time? Is each of us to fill his obscure corner of this earth for a brief while and then disappear? When I look abroad, on every side, I see dispute, contradiction, distraction. When I turn my eye inwards, I find nothing but doubt and ignorance. What am I? From what cause do I derive my existence? To what condition shall I return? I am confounded with these questions. I begin to fancy myself environed with the deepest darkness on every side, wrote the Scottish skeptical thinker David Hume. Is it possible for us to find the true answers to these perplexing questions? Man flings these questions at the face of life and waits, but finds no answer till he totters into the grave. Yet the gods have invested man with intelligence, a faculty which is fully equal to discovering the truth about his own self, though it may fail when confronted by the deeper riddle of the universe. These are the riddles of life which have puzzled the sages of 60 generations and will puzzle many more. The cleverest minds, the ablest pens, and the most eloquent lips have bruised themselves with these dark enigmas. But still mankind gropes for the answers. Man, a doubting and despairing figure, stalks across the cold waste of this world and laughs cynically at the name of God. But despair is the stricken child of ignorance. God has sent a true light into the heart of every child that is born, but it must be unveiled. We have wrapped around it the dark shrouds that blind us, and we ourselves must unwrap them. No cry that goes up from the depths of a sincere heart goes up in vain, and if your prayer is fashioned aright, it will be answered by the God in your own heart. The average man sends out his tentacles towards life, feeling his way towards something he does not quite comprehend. He has hardly perceived that when he begins to apply his intelligence to the solution of his problem, himself, he will automatically solve the parallel problems of God, life, the soul, happiness, and so on. The white race has wandered all over the surface of this earth in search of new Americas, till there is hardly a rod of land upon which it has not set foot. Yet I propose to indicate here another world, which has indeed been explored by a few, but ignored by many. It is not so very long ago that our geographers denied the existence of a goodly part of this world that they inhabited. The spacious concept of America was once placed among the things at which to laugh loudly. So, too, it has been the case with the common notion that what we can at present see of man, his fleshly form, represents all that he is and all that we are ever likely to be. The worms will hold high revel over the sum total of ourselves and not merely over our bodies. The notion is a nasty one, but many, if not most people, consider it as a true and regard the possibility of surviving death as something to be ridiculed. They shake their heads and profess that they cannot understand the mystery of spirit, but they will readily accept matter, whose ultimate nature is hardly less mysterious. It is part of my purpose to show that such persons go wrong when they make the mistake of accepting the common condition of human mentality as representing its ultimate. It is true that there are slimy trails in man dark with the creeping of strange and vile creatures. But then there are also radiant places where the soul swiftly takes wings. The psychoanalyst who looks only for the first finds them. Throughout the verbal traditions handed down by our earlier forefathers, and shining through the literature of the world, far back as the first rude manuscripts of Oriental peoples, and up to the newest product of the printer's press of this year of grace, there has been a strange yet recurring allusion to another self within man. It does not matter what name was given to this mysterious self, whether it be called soul or breath, spirit or ghost. There is, indeed, no other doctrine in the world which possesses so far-flung an intellectual ancestry as this. Everybody knows that there is a fixed limit to the range within which normal human consciousness can function. Everybody does not know that there have always been some intrepid humans who have played the King Canute to their own minds, bidding the turbulent waves of thought roll back until consciousness crossed the normal limit and found itself in the free worlds of the spirit. These statements of experience made by spiritual seers throughout the ages must be faced. They are either the babblings of irresponsible lunatics, or they are words of such importance as to upset the present materialistic basis of our life. I do not know that it will avail us much trying to trace out the paternity of this doctrine, for truth may arise in a multitude of heads all over the globe, and none be its primal father save the mysterious source whence all thought takes rise. We can sometimes learn truer lessons by studying nature than by studying books. A man once sat and watched a worm bore a hole through a piece of wood. This simple observation taught him the principle of boring tunnels. Today, because of this man's insight, trains run under wide rivers and through mountains of solid rock. So the first seers, watching the wanderings of thought within their own minds, discovered that there was something which came into action when thinking momentarily stopped. That something was the first faint intimation of the soul. Thus the science of soul discovery was born, and the ancients began to teach men how to know the truth about themselves. In almost every pre-Christian civilization, this knowledge was communicated in various ways. In Sumeria, Babylon, Chaldea, China, Persia, India, Mexico, among the North American Indians, the Central American Mayas, and the ill-fated Aztecs, by the Essenic fraternity among the Jews, and by the Gnostics of Eastern Mediterranean cities. Amid the majestic ruins which strew the face of present-day Greece, there stands a vast roofless structure of tumbling walls and broken columns. They are all that is left of the site where once the festival of the Eleusinian mysteries were celebrated in pomp and reverence under the aegis of Athens. There are few today who understand what went on behind the walls of this sanctuary. Initiation into these mysteries was esteemed a subject of high importance among the ancients, though we moderns hardly know what it means. Men like Macedonian Alexander and Roman Julius Caesar did not hesitate to avail themselves of this sublime and unforgettable experience, and emerged to fulfill more consciously the great parts which destiny had allotted them. Such was the grandeur of the knowledge which came to them behind closed and guarded doors. When the epiphanies of the Greek mysteries were concluded, the last words heard by the initiate were, "Go in peace." And it is written by those who were themselves initiated that ever after he went his way through life with a soul at rest and mind serene. Initiation was really nothing more than to enter into an awareness of what the candidate really was. It completed the makeup of man, and anyone who had not experienced it was really but half a man. Some broken fragments of what he learned in those old temples I have put into this book. But I have attempted to formulate these hoary old truths in language which will appeal to modern people and to apply them to practical life. The key to the whole problem of this ancient mystery institution was given by Plutarch when he wrote, "At the moment of death, the soul experiences the same impressions as those who are initiated into the great mysteries." Scholars are likewise uncertain as to the real purport of the Great Pyramid, that vast building whose interior mirrors the eternal quiet of the yellow deserts of Egypt, because in its later days the funerary rites of the pharaohs were celebrated there. They arrive at the mistaken but natural conclusion that this marvelous structure was planned by its builders as a gigantic tomb. Its true purpose was infinitely higher than that. Here were brought candidates for the mystic experience called initiation, an experience wherein they were enabled to obtain temporary release from the limitations of the body and to contact this other self within man, among other things. This experience was brought about by external agency, by means of the powerful help of the high priest of that time. Go to the British Museum and you will see a gigantic stone figure brought there many years ago by a sailing ship from Easter Island, off the coast of South America. Examine the reverse side of the statue and you will see clearly cut of a handled cross. It is identical with the cross of life, or Gru Ansata, so often shown in ancient Egyptian representations as being carried by their deities in their hands, and so often referred to as the key to the mysteries. This is not merely a coincidence, but a significant pointer to the fact that the mystery initiations were not unknown across the Atlantic. There exists in Central America a structure outwardly similar to, but inwardly different from the Egyptian pyramid, which was also used for religio-mystical ceremonies. The mysterious events which took place in the one were duplicated in the other, and what occurred in the Greek Eleusinian temple was not dissimilar in its results to the results of both. There were several grades of initiation, naturally, but the candidates who succeeded in passing even the first had a new world of being temporarily open to them, and went back to the world as changed men and women, for they had temporarily touched their hidden selves. If this interior experience was possible in the 20th century BC, it is also possible in the 20th century AD. The fundamental nature of man has not changed during the interval. It is true, however, that the experience was easier found and more often attained in the earlier days because then life was more leisurely and less complicated. Is this secret self nothing more than the wild fancy or vague chimera of a few but famous men about whom time and history tells us? Has this long chain of spiritual tradition no links that are made of stronger substance than superstition? Yet the riddles which baffle us must have baffled Babylon, to take a single example of an early civilization too. If there were thinking men of that epoch who arrived at some kind of solution which agrees in essence with that which was arrived at by thinking men of India, China, Greece, Egypt, Rome, it might be worth our while to investigate that solution. The result of such an investigation will be either to strengthen our present position and to weaken theirs, or to weaken our own dearly cherished beliefs and to confirm the doctrines of the ancients. And the only sort of investigation which is of any use to this inquiry is a practical one. I have taken the trouble to carry out such a research, though not without some difficulty, and in the sequence have compelled to testify that the wisdom of the ancients is not altogether a fanciful thing. Indeed, I have discovered that their doctrines, instead of being the unreal coinage of dreamers' heads, contain much in which we, who live and work in the bustling world, may place credence. The modern mind does not care to resort to the famous thinkers of antiquity to have its problems solved. Thereby it misses much. It may be that the meditations of these sages of antiquity can yield not a little fruit for the students of modernity. We may attempt to cut ourselves adrift from the great philosophies of the past, but since they were based on the eternal principles upon which all true thinking must be based, we shall be forced to return. Philosophy fell from power when the over-intellectual reduced it to mere disputation. It will be restored to its rightful place when the over-sophisticated souls of today awake to the need of a more enlightened outlook than the present confused teaching can afford. There is something more in man than is apparent from ordinary impressions. The discoveries of abnormal psychology throw out strange hints about this, and the never-ending accounts of mystical experience confirm it. What is this moreness in man which causes him to hold fine ideals and to foster great thoughts? What is this finer spiritual presence in his heart which fitfully pulls him away from a merely earthly existence, thus setting up constant strife between the angel and the beast which tenant our body? When we moderns are told that God is not a mere word to be argued and debated about, but a state of consciousness, we can realize here and now in the flesh, we raise our eyebrows. When some spiritual seer quietly tells us that there are God-knowing men living among us now, we significantly tap our foreheads. When further, we are assured that we bear the divine within our breast, and that divinity constitutes our true selfhood, we smile in a superior way. Yet this is not theory, nor is it sentiment. It is an open and patent fact to people who have gone some way in spiritual precipitancy. Before the calm sphinx of a truly spiritual teaching, the West stares blankly. It can make the most amazing machines. It can build ships of stupendous size. It can transform our homes with the wonders of wireless and applied electricity. Yet it cannot do this simple thing. It cannot receive and understand the meaning of life. The plain fact is that calamity has fallen upon us, and we have forgotten who we are. We can trace our kin to the ape with a wealth of detail and proof for this miserable pedigree, but we cannot remember our kindred with the angel. We have been too content with allocating the high places of spirituality to the few names of far-off past, and with assigning the muddy depths to humanity in general. We forget our own divine nature. For we too can approach Jesus, become Buddha-like, or win the wisdom of a Plato. Yet unless we believe this passionately, we shall remain sunk to a status near the animals. An extract from Algernon C. Swinburne poem Hertha. Quote, "But what thing dost thou now, looking Godward, to cry, I am I, thou art thou, I am low, thou art high? I am thou whom thou seekest to find. Find thou but thyself, thou art I. O my sons, O too dutiful towards God, not of me. Was not I enough beautiful? Was it hard to be free? For behold, I am with you and in you and of you. Look forth now and see. End. There are those who will express disdain at this egocentric philosophy. Then I shall answer not with my own words, but with the inspired announcement of the German seer Eckhart. God is at the center of man. Does one blaspheme against God and thus defying the self? Only the superficial can make this accusation, for the true soul of man is divinity. There can be no blasphemy in such an attitude. We have nearly forgotten the existence of the spiritual self, though the self, in its long-waiting vigil, will never forget us. Why has man possessed the religious yearning? Because we love ourselves, because we unconsciously yearn for union with our true selves. The human race possesses an age which defies imagination. Countless figures of men, women, and children have appeared upon this turning planet through aeons of time, and having played their parts, seem to have sunk down to eternal sleep. The keenest intellects of our time are busy gathering the materials left by the races of yesterday, the upheaval vestiges of ancient civilizations, and the secrets of cataclysmic past. Yet the seer must smile at their admirable but pathetic efforts to take intellectual toll of an ancestry which is infinitely outstretched. In the picturesque words of Sulpicius to Cicero, all things are being precipitated by the relentless decree of an immutable fate down the yawning throat of everlasting oblivion. If we follow the seers and fling the aeons aside, peering into the dimmest regions of prehistoric antiquity, we reach a period when man entirely dropped his body of flesh and inhabited an electromagnetic form, a radiant body of ether. Farther back, there was a change in his inner nature, and he dropped off all passions and personal emotions entirely, all feelings or desires like fear, anger, hatred, lust, and the like. But thoughts still played in his consciousness, still arose like waves upon the surface of his mind, and still connected themselves with his personal life. And so we trace him back to a time when even thoughts took their exit, and when the necessity of thinking in a sequential logical manner in order to obtain understanding disappeared. Not only did he no longer need the reasoning faculty, but it even became a hindrance to him. For man had now reached the naked condition of pure selfhood. The whole matter might perhaps be put more plainly by saying that the human race, in the course of its long history, has superimposed a second self upon the individual nature with which each man began. The second self is usually called the person, and came into being through a union of spirit and matter, through a commingling of particles of consciousness drawn from the ever-conscious real self with the particles of unconscious matter drawn from the body. This second and later self is the one we each of us know, the personal self. But the first and real self, which existed before thinking and desiring appeared within the being of man, is the one which few of us know, which is subtle and not so apparent because it makes us all partake of the nature of divinity. It lives always over our heads, an angelic thing of unimaginable grandeur and mysterious sublimity, and therefore I call it the Overself. Back of the man we see lives another man whom we do not see. Back of this body of flesh is a starry and sublime consciousness. This doctrine of the true self in man is expressed beautifully by one of India's ancient seers. Unseen but seeing, unheard but hearing, unperceived but perceiving, unknown but knowing. This is thyself, the ruler within, the immortal. The materialist never tires of telling us how foolish the pale visionary is for trying to catch clouds. And the overself, sitting in the heart of the taunter, smiles tolerantly at all his logical twaddle. We live our true lives in the depths of our hearts, not in the superficial mask of personality which we show the world. The living inhabitant is more important than the stone house. Walt Whitman, that bluff and enthusiastic Yankee rhymeless poet, saw the truth in his half-confused manner and expressed it thus in Leaves of Grass. I swear I begin to see the meaning of these things. It is not the earth, it is not America who is so great. It is I who am great, or to be great. Underneath all, individuals. I swear nothing is good to me now that ignores individuals. The whole theory of the universe is directed unerringly to one single individually, namely to you. And this from Whitman's poem, To You. Oh, I could sing such grandeurs and glories about you. You have not known what you are. You have slumbered upon yourself all your life. The mockeries are not you. Underneath them and within them, I see you lurk. Whoever you are, claim your own. There are memorable moments in our lives when we receive from the Overself hints of a higher existence possible to man. At such times, our house of life is unshuttered and slender rays of dawn enter in. We know then that the soul's dream can come true, that love and truth and happiness are indeed our birthright. But alas, the brief hour passes, and with it our faith. Are they then to be of no worth to us, those shining lapses into a diviner existence? Let them stand as pillars of cloud by day, pillars of fire by night, to guide us through the wilderness of modern times. These faint and impalpable intuitions which come to a man in his sanest moments are half-heard whispers of this greater self of his. The spiritual call is forever trying to voice itself in the heart of mankind, but we do not listen. The spiritual impulses which arise in the hearts of our best men are themselves the best token of a higher possibility for the race. Man, as he really is, and as he eternally has been and shall be, is a spiritual being. Life in the physical body does not detract from the truth of this statement. The material senses hold man under a hypnotic glamour and, real enough in their own way, cause him to confound his true self with them. Heaven lies about us, not only during the innocent days of infancy, but every moment of existence, yet we know it not. A few are so close to this truth that they are unconsciously waiting for the miraculous moment of recognition. They have but to be told of it in the right way, and hope will flash up in their souls. That hope is the silent voice of the Overself. It is somewhat ironical that man's very self, his true nature, has become a secret in these days. Man walks along the dusty roads of life like that seeker of old time who spent the years wandering through foreign lands in the quest of a rare treasure of which he had heard, whilst all the time he himself was being sought for as the heir to a great fortune. Wrapped in the folds of our own nature hides a rare jewel, though we know it not. None has yet dared to set a price upon it, nor will any ever dare to do so, for its value is beyond all things of known worth. We must try, then, to trace out the Overself, to run down the gamut of our inner workings till we can get no farther. Then we shall realize that body and intellect are not our be-all, but that the Overself is the witness of both, the source of complete peace, perfect intelligence, and absolute immortality. We of this practical century have little confidence in abstract propositions. We are always dubious about thoughts which carry us away from the concrete world. We distrust and deprecate theoretical systems which take their start out of the air. The question will be asked, do you possess any practical method whereby we may attain this self-knowledge which you praise so much? Or is yours but a speculative doctrine which may make a nice adornment to the facade of metaphysics, but is without utility to men who work, live, love, and suffer? Is it but a dreamy fancy which cannot hold out against the grim actualities of modern city life? And so, without any more ado, I shall place before the reader a description of the way of investigation which he, too, may follow if he cares, and which, carried to a successful issue, will answer convincingly the perplexing questions that troubled my head once and may now trouble his. Meet me at the next video where we continue with the book titled The Secret Path, and the author will get into the practice of mental quiet and also a technique of self-analysis. If you haven't done so, please do hit the like button, share this with like-minded people, and subscribe to the channel so you can get notified of next videos when they come up. Thank you.